Hello fans and friends across the universe. Welcome to my YouTube channel, From Me to You. My name's Keir Smith. I saw something recently on YouTube, I can't remember where, but someone asked the question, which rock star death affected you the most? And it didn't take me too long to answer that question, but then I quickly thought of another one, and as you can tell from the pictures behind me, the two rock star deaths that affected me the most were those of George Harrison and Michael Jackson. So I'd like to talk a bit about these two legends. I'm such a big fan of both, so I'll tell you when I became a fan, some of my favourite songs by them, and sadly how they passed away. And I'll also show you the newspaper articles that were printed the following day after they died. So I'll start with George Harrison, the quiet one, the mystical one. The first time I heard George Harrison was on the Beatles' Help album. My brother had a copy of it on CD, and that was the first Beatles album I remember being around the house. And there were two George Harrison compositions on that album. The first one being I Need You on side 1 and You Like Me Too Much on side 2. So that was the first time I knowingly heard George Harrison sing. But then some months later I heard Revolver for the first time, and hearing the song Love You Too completely blew my mind. I'd never heard Indian music before. You've got to remember this was pre-internet days. I was 14 years old at the time in 1995. I fell in love with it immediately, and then hearing Within You Without You from Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, equally brilliant. And I remember thinking to myself, this George guy has got his finger on the pulse. He's clever, forward-thinking, smart, wise. And he quickly became my favourite Beatle, my first love. And as a big George and Beatles fan, I'll tell you that all of George's songs that he wrote with the Beatles, all 22 of them, range from good to outstanding. To move from the straightforward pop of something like I Need You to something as deep and profound as While My Guitar Gently Weeps in just over 3 years is astounding. And then later on buying up all of George's solo back catalogue, that was so exciting and a real treasure trove. And it all started with the best of Dark Horse years, 1976 to 1989. This was the first George solo material that I bought. And I've still got the receipt from when I bought it. I was 15 years old at the time. I don't know if you can see that, but in the bottom corner there, it says I bought it on the 4th of March, 1996 for $14.99. George Harrison passed away on the 29th of November, 2001, after losing his battle with lung cancer. George had been diagnosed with throat cancer back in 1997, but was said to have responded well to treatment. But then on the 30th of December 1999, George suffered an attack at his Friar Park home by an intruder whose name I won't mention. George suffered several stab wounds, which caused a punctured lung, very nearly fatal. And those in George's close circle believed that the attack brought about a change in him and was the cause for the cancer's return. And I have to say, at that time, that very thought crossed my mind a good few times. And in July 2001, George underwent a course of radiotherapy for a brain tumour and a further course of radiotherapy in November 2001. And of course, he didn't recover. And it's awfully sad. It still makes me sad. I think the saddest part is that attack that happened a couple of years before George died. This monster breaks into George's Friar Park home. It's unbelievable. The day after George Harrison died, I went out and I bought 3 newspapers, merely to mark the sad situation, I guess. This is the Sun newspaper that had the front cover of the Let It Be album with George and John greyed out, and the headline Love One Another, which is said to be the last message of George Harrison. This one here is the Daily Mail. George pictured here with John in their Beatles heyday. George Harrison 1943 to 2001, John Lennon 1940 to 1980. And I saved the best till last because I really like this headline. The Mirror and the World Gently Weeps. George Harrison, he's an enormous part of my life, a huge source of inspiration to me. He always has been, he always will be. His music, his wisdom, his humour, his life. What a legacy. But to end upon a happy note, I'll give you 6 songs by the great George Harrison, 3 with the Beatles and 3 from his solo years that I absolutely adore. With the Beatles, I'll go with It's All Too Much, Here Comes the Sun and Love You Too. And from his solo years, I'll go with Run of the Mill, Blow Away and This Is Love. Now, Michael Jackson, the king of pop. I would have been very young when I first heard Michael Jackson. I think I was about 6 or 7 years old when I was first aware of him. And I always remember my mum and dad had this Motown Gold record, 18 Greatest Hits of Motown. And on that record, on side 1, it had a song by the Jackson 5 called I'll Be There. And on side 2, it had a song by Michael Jackson called Got to Be There. And I loved both of them songs, of course. And I also remember hearing Rockin' Robin by the Jackson 5 when I was young, and I really like that too. But the song by Michael Jackson that really blew me away and changed everything really was Thriller. And I remember holding the album Thriller in my tiny hands as a 6 or 7-year-old boy and being absolutely fascinated by that gatefold, thinking, wow, he's got a tiger on his leg. And I remember so well, me and my brother Craig watched that Thriller video endlessly. My dad hired that video from the Blockbuster video store, and the time sadly came that we had to return it. And apparently me and Craig begged my parents not to take the video back and to let us keep it, and my dad never returned it. Me and Craig must have watched that video 50 to 100 times. It was the full-length video, the 15-minute Thriller video, and the making of the Thriller video on the back of it. It was brilliant. And any kid growing up in the 80s will tell you that Jacko was everything. And my mum and dad were clearly feeding our mild obsession for everything Michael Jackson, because I remember us having Destiny by the Jackson 5 on record and Triumph. And we had Off the Wall, Thriller and Bad. Talk about 3 great albums in a row. Whew. Michael Jackson had absolutely everything. He was great looking, he could sing, boy could he sing, boy could he dance, his songs were amazing, powerful, and his videos were out of this world. Michael Jackson sadly passed away on the 25th of June 2009. Michael had been working really hard preparing for the upcoming This Is It tour, the final curtain call as he called it. And I remember reading at the time that he'd apparently agreed to do 10 shows. And I can remember thinking, he doesn't look well. He looks really ill and frail. And I just hope that he makes it through these 10 shows. And then before you knew it, the promoters announced that there was going to be 50 shows. And I remember really worrying then, thinking, he's not fit, he's not ready, he can't possibly get through that. Anyone who's ever seen any of Michael Jackson's shows, either live or on TV, will know that he's all singing, all dancing. The physical energy that he puts into every performance is a lot. And you can never be too sure what comes out in the press, but apparently Michael was given a whole host of drugs for pain relief, this, that and the other. And clearly it was a very dangerous cocktail that led to a cardiac arrest. It was a real shock when Michael Jackson died. And I remember getting the text message from my brother Craig early in the morning, just before 8 o'clock time, I think it was. And he just sent me a message saying, shit, Jacko's dead. And I remember my girlfriend at the time coming down the stairs, and I told her the news, and she was taken aback. And we left the house, we got in the car ready to go to work, and she put the car radio on. And no sooner had she done that, Man in the Mirror came on, and I thought, crikey, this is real. The Sun newspaper didn't seem to be too sympathetic as they ran this awful headline. Jacko, dead. Heart attack kills Pop King Michael, 50. And the following day, on the 27th of June, I again picked up the Sun because it had a souvenir pull-out that I wanted. And this time it was running the headline revealing the drugs cocktail that Michael was supposed to have been taking on a daily basis. And with Jacko, again, awfully, awfully sad. But I can't help but think that he was getting sold down the river, a bit like Elvis was. And I think Jacko's fame and fortune and all of the people around him, everyone that was in this crazy Michael Jackson mania, killed him as much as he killed himself. But like George Harrison, Michael Jackson also gave me some of my favourite music. And again, I'll give you 6 songs that I absolutely love by Michael Jackson, 3 with the Jackson 5 and 3 from his solo years. With the Jackson 5, I'll go with Push Me Away, Time Waits for No One and Can You Feel It? And 3 from his solo back catalogue, I'll go with Beat It, Human Nature and Liberian Girl. So they were the 2 rock star deaths that affected me the most. George Harrison and Michael Jackson, 2 of my ultimate all-time heroes. Rest in peace. I'd like to thank everybody who took the time to watch this video, and I'll see you next time. But just before I go, I'd like to leave you with a quote that I read the other day that I thought was rather fitting. It's hard to forget someone who gave you so much to remember.